Karen is the Director of Provincial Outreach for the Center for Interdisciplinary Research and Collaboration in Autism. She has a PhD and she works in the Department of Educational Counseling, Psychology, and Special Education at UBC. So I'm just going to allow my screen to be shared so she can go over her presentation. Thanks everyone, while you wait for me to set this up.
Well, thank you so much for having me here at your meeting today. I'm going to talk to you about a training initiative that we're doing at UBC at CIRCA. I'll just keep it simple with the name, the Center for Interdisciplinary Research and Collaboration in Autism. And I'm just going to sort of give you a little bit of background about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then I have a request out there for your feedback and to ask if anybody would like to be interviewed for the project. But so I'll go through my short presentation, and then I'll stop sharing my screen and we can have an open discussion. And I'm open to chatting about anything about this project and the other two projects that we're doing at UBC, which I'll tell you about. So basically the purpose of what we're doing is to create some training opportunities for professionals and caregivers, so childcare providers, on autism spectrum disorder. And our goal is to improve inclusion and provide autistic individuals better access to effective evidence-based supports across BC. So how did this come about and why are we doing this? Well, I'm actually on a secondment over from the Ministry of Children and Family. Over for 4 years, I'm working at UBC. And when I was with the ministry, we did a cross-ministry services and supports review. So that meant we took a look at all the sort of service delivery options and the supports that are available in the area of autism for our Ministry of Children and Family, for education, for health, as well as community living and adult services. And what we found was there was a real gap in professional development for others, for people besides autistic individuals themselves. And so really a lot of the times that what we found was that there's a lot of services, which is wonderful to provide services to individuals themselves, but they often focus on trying to get an autistic person to change who they are to fit in. And we thought that's really not the acceptance goal that we're looking for. And it's really about switching that and providing training for other professionals to learn how to adjust their practices to better support, accept, and include autistic individuals. And so what we did is we first did a strategic plan. So I went around the province and I had about 55 interviews in whole, talked to well over 260 stakeholders, including autistic individuals, families, people in the service division, people in government, and basically asked them the question, who needs to know more about the area of autism and what do they need to know? Well, I got everything from my landlord needs to know more about autism, all the way to my physician needs to know more about autism, and 35 different service sectors in between. And this is only a 4-year project. We can't train everybody. So what we did is we brought together a group of stakeholders, including autistic individuals, and we asked them we provided all the information that we got from the interviews of 260 people across the province, and we honed it down to 3 service sectors that we were going to focus on. But before I get to those 3 service sectors, I just want to show you some of it's a very noisy slide, but it's all of the logos of the different associations that we also connected with as we move through the development to co-design what targets, what professionals we think need to have some training in the area of autism so that they can better support and include individuals. So the targeted service sectors that we thought were priorities or were recommended to us as priorities were medical and dental professionals. So those are physicians and pediatricians, dentists and dental hygienists. What we heard loud and clear across the province was that many autistic individuals are not necessarily feeling heard with their physician. Families are having concerns because physicians weren't really clear on sort of what are the services that are offered, what the diagnostic process is like in British Columbia, things like that. And of course, in dental practice, there was sort of loud and clear that there's, especially young children, are having to go in and go under general anesthetic to receive quite simple dental procedures. So there really was a need to provide some training to that service area. The second service area that people recommended as a priority for us to provide training were for childcare service providers, so childcare workers throughout the province. We all know that government is really pushing for a childcare program, but a lot of families were saying, so these are kids under the age of kindergarten, a lot of families were saying that's all well and good, but often as soon as I mention the word autism, a lot of these service childcare providers don't have room for my kid in their childcare setting. And so, it really is just sort of an issue of some, general education for childcare providers to improve some of their abilities and confidence to understand how to better support children with a wide variety of presentations in the childcare setting. And the one that I'm going to talk to you about today is the area of employment-related professionals. The strategic plan group really felt that there is a gap, even though we have great programs that are out there nationally, like Ready, Willing, and Able, and some other groups that are focusing on employment for autistic individuals. Really, there was a gap of human resource professionals understanding autism and how better to support, and employers, co-workers, and Work BC. So what we did is, so for all of these programs, before I dive into where we're at for the employment one, for all of the programs that we've done to date, what we've done is we gave partnerships across each service sector. So for example, with physicians, we partnered with the College of Physicians, as well as UBC Continuing Professional Development. UBC Continuing Professional Development is the one that accredits all of the continuing education for physicians. So it's very important to us that anything that we create, people have an incentive to take it. And unfortunately, for a lot of professionals, that incentive is that they get continuing education credits for their associations. So we've made sure that in each sector that we're targeting, that we are making sure that anything that we create will be eligible as a continuing education credit. So we, in the area of employment, we have partnered with the Chartered Professionals of Human Resources in BC and Yukon. We've established advisory committees for each of these three service sectors: the medical, dental, actually medical physicians has a advisory committee, and then the dentistry has an advisory committee, and then there's a childcare advisory committee and an employment advisory committee. On each of these committees are individuals with autism, families, as well as sort of the relevant professionals or experts in that field. We also have completed a service sector needs assessment. So what we did is we went around, because this training is not targeting autistic individuals themselves. This training is to provide professional development for those three different service sectors. So we really needed to talk to those people to find out what their needs were. What do they want to learn? What do they need to learn? Where do they see where we could help the most? So we had, back in the day when we could all meet in the same room, we did have some face-to-face meetings with human resource professionals and employers in groups across the Lower Mainland. And then more recently, we've done a lot of these types of consultations and needs assessments with physicians, dentists, dental hygienists, and childcare providers, of which we also did a survey for childcare providers. So as I said, we have partners with each of these service sectors. We've created advisory groups because we're now well into 2 years into this project. We've also completed an in-depth service sector. We looked at sort of what already exists online in terms of training for these professionals in the area of autism, because we certainly don't want to duplicate what is already out there. We want to, anything we create, we want it to be complementary. I've drafted all of the curriculum content. So the sort of by looking at the needs assessment and asking each of those service sectors, what do you want to know? What would be helpful for you? We've created the topics for each of the service sectors. And so right now we're in progress. Right now, what we're doing is the whole sort of what does the end product look like? Well, it is a series of free online professional development modules or training materials to address these needs. And I'm going to show you exactly what one of those online modules looks like. It's not something it's not something like you're watching here today with this talking head of mine and a PowerPoint presentation. These modules are interactive. You read a little bit, you might click on something, things can flip around. It very much tries to engage the learner. And again, in this respect, the learner are those professionals in those areas: physicians, dentists, employers, human resource professionals, and childcare workers. And so we're developing those modules for them. So let's, as I go forward, let's talk specifically about where we're at with the employment modules. We completed a needs assessment, as I said, with human resource professionals in BC. We also distributed and so to be able to create, so we got an idea of what people wanted to better understand. And then so we feel very strongly that there's a first person voice, that voice drives the content of what we're developing. So we distributed a workplace survey, and it was completed by, it was only targeted to autistic individuals who are either currently employed or had been employed in the past or have had volunteer experience. And we distributed that across Canada. And about about over 170 autistic individuals across the country completed that survey. And that survey asked people about what are the barriers to different to employment, what are the barriers to when you're looking for a job in terms of how job advertisements are written, or how the job description is written, and what things work for you. What do you think would work better for you? We also asked about strategies when people are onboarding or starting their new job. What are some strategies that work for you to make you feel successful in that new work environment? So from there, we also have been meeting with our advisory committee, which does include autistic individuals as well as experts in the area of autism and employment. And then we developed some content that really, our content really focuses on the strengths of autistic employees and the advantages of creating inclusive work environments. So our estimated time of sort of release for our modules is going to be available early next year, in the beginning of the year, 2021, when 2020 is finally over. And it will be targeted to HR professionals, employers, and anyone who's actually interested will be able to access and take these modules for free, and they will be available in the new year. So what is the content? Again, there's a lot on this slide, but we've created 5 modules. The first one is called Autism in the Workplace, an Introductory Overview. The learning objective here is to really learn about persons with autism and to briefly review sort of the following core 4 topic areas. And the other topic areas are, the business case for hiring inclusively, where people will learn to understand that there is a great financial benefit to be hiring inclusively, and they'll learn that there are lots of strengths to bring autistic employees and access that talent pool. The third is creating an inclusive workplace culture. And that's really about learning really practical strategies, things that they can change in their behavior in their company to create effective, inclusive work environments to support autistic employees. The fourth module are strategies around inclusive recruitment. So learning things to adjust the recruitment process and to remove barriers. Everything from ensuring that the job description is clear and that there's not additional sort of would like to have qualifications that are on there, that the job descriptions are very clear, as well as how to provide a wide variety of interview options and not just rely on the sit down face-to-face question and answer format. So, and the final one is about retention strategies. And these are really a range of strategies that people can do that will support onboarding or when you're learning to start a new job and the day-to-day success of autistic employees. And so that's the structure. And I'll show you an example of one of these modules in a minute. Our next steps is we've now created the content for the employee module. As I said, that content was informed by a survey of over 170 autistic individuals across the country, as well as feedback from our advisory committee. And of course, with all of the research that we've done at UBC in looking at what are sort of the evidence base and what are things that have worked out there, so that we're sort of really incorporating what does the research say, what autistic employees say, and also sort of what other stakeholders who are in the field of employment say as well. So we created the content for the 5 modules there. So our next step is, as I said, our modules are quite interactive. It's not just a talking head and someone watching PowerPoint like we're doing right now, is that we really want to create video segments that highlight the firsthand employment experiences of autistic individuals and their inclusive employers, because we want to provide real life examples to the issues that we're raising in the modules and have a real first person voice there throughout all of the text. So it's not just people reading, but they're really hearing from employees in the field about their opinions on whatever that topic is. So what we're looking for, and the reason I connected with Joed and your society is we're looking to interview, and I know that I have one person already that has agreed to be interviewed from your area, and so far I have a few other employees that have also agreed. So we're looking to interview 7 to 10 or as many as we can autistic employees. You can be employed currently or employed in the past. And we're also going to be interviewing 3 or 4 inclusive employers. All participants will be paid for their time. This is extremely important to us. It's real work, real pay. We're not asking people to volunteer their time, which is often the case, that everyone else is paid for their time, but the actual first person voice is often sort of asked to do it for free, and that's not where we are. We have a interesting way that we are able to pay you for your time, but it includes your prep time. So anything you do to prepare to answering the questions, your filming time, and your travel time. The filming is going to be scheduled quite flexible. We'll have a variety of choices that you can choose from to come to a filming, and it will take place in the Lower Mainland. And our goal is to complete it by late November. What will happen at the interview? Again, sorry, a squishy, busy slide, but interviews will be structured around each of employees' unique experience so that you have the opportunity to share your thoughts, your story, your ideas on the topic of employment. We will provide all interview questions well ahead of time for your review. You are welcome to add or take away at your own discretion any questions that you feel that we should be asking and that you want to talk about, or questions that you feel don't apply to you or you don't feel comfortable answering. That's just fine. You can answer as many or as few questions as you'd like. There will be time to talk about and rehearse the responses before we're filming. And some example questions that we're asking, just to give you an idea, is, do you prefer person first language or identity first language, and why? We think that's really important for employers to understand identity first language in the area of autism and people's identity. What do you want your employers to know? What strengths do you offer an employer? What helps you most when you're starting a new job? What are your thoughts on sharing? Or some people use the term disclosing, which is sort of like you're sharing a secret. I don't know why, but it's disclosing. So we like sharing of personal information better. So what are your thoughts on sharing with your employer or your coworkers of your diagnosis or that you are autistic? What's the biggest barrier you face when you have a traditional face-to-face interview? What are some of the workplace adjustments that helped you on the job? So there are questions like that that really focus on the key issues that we're addressing in each of the modules. How will it work? So interviews will take place on location, most likely in Richmond. We haven't secured that yet, but they will most likely be there. We will cover the costs of people's transportation to and from the location. Hopefully it will be in easy access to transit, but if not, we're also open to providing funding for taxi or Uber. Most of the videos are going to be filmed individually, given COVID restrictions. And as I said before, all COVID-19 protocols will be followed. So everybody will be at a safe distance. Masks will be worn up until the point that we're at a safe distance and can have you on film. Each video is professionally filmed and edited. You'll have an opportunity to review your on-camera interview, and you'll have final approval on what you wish to have shared in the final product. And all participants will have an opportunity to try out the online modules prior to filming to get a sense of what they look like. And I'm just going to come back to that link in a second because I just have one more slide here. Oh, no, I'll do it now. Sorry. So you'll have an opportunity to review what you have done. And if you don't feel comfortable, if you say, you know what, I did that interview and I don't feel comfortable it being used now, so I don't want any of it used, that's fine. We'll continue. We'll still happy to compensate you for your time and appreciate that you took the time to come and meet with us. So the interviews, how they're going to work is, it won't be sort of an interview of like a 40-second interview or a 40-second clip of just one person. So when we ask some of those questions, for example, what do you want people to know about your strengths? We'll ask everybody sort of similar or the same question, and then we'll put those the clips will be edited together into sort of a montage so that people get a sense of what a variety of voices say about that a specific topic. So before we open it up to sort of questions and my sort of ask to you, if anybody here today is interested or wants to learn more about being interviewed, I didn't put my contact information here. That was silly of me. I will pull that up in a second. Sorry. And so future, we also have other opportunities in the future. As I said, we are doing the training for physicians. We're creating training for dental professionals as well as childcare providers. And in each of those modules, we will also be having a lot of first person voices through this sort of interview process. So if that's something that may interest you in the future, you can also contact me and get to know that. So I'm going to end the slideshow and I'm going to just quickly type up. I think I'll go back to the first one and I will add, because I didn't hear, I will just, so I can keep this one up for a minute. Karen.bopp@ubc.ca. So that's where you can get a hold of me, is karen.bopp, B-O-P-P, @ubc.ca. Don't know, I'm going to, oh, there it is. Sorry, it's, I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to just write it on the chat because I can see the chat here. I'm going to share my screen again and I'm going to just quickly show you what a module looks like. Do people see that? Do you see Autism in the Workplace, an introductory overview?
Yes, we do.
Yes, thank you. So what happens is you come here and the learner will start the module. And like I said, each page, I'm just going to sort of scroll down the page, isn't very long. So the learner isn't scrolling, or just sort of listening to one thing. They have a bit of text to read, and then there's typically sometimes a video to watch. And so right now we're using this lovely beach scene as our video, but these are where the interview videos that I talked about will be inserted. So in this video is actually the first one, and it's actually an autistic individual who's going to sort of give an introduction to the whole project and talk about the importance of work for adults, a variety of skill sets, simple things that people can do to help hire inclusively, and how that hiring inclusively is good for business. So, you know, every time you see one of these beach scenes, that's just where one of these videos is going to be inserted. So you go through and the learner reads a little bit, welcome to the Autism in the Workplace. They see the welcoming video, and then they look at each of the learning objectives. And here's where some interactive components happen. So they flip each of these tiles and they take a look at sort of the learning objectives for this one module. And once they've read that, they go on to the next section. We talk about a strength-based approach here. So again, there's a little bit of reading. There's some quotes here. And then people go on to the next section. I can give you the links to these if you choose to be interviewed. I'll give you the links so people can go through this on their own time. So, there's nowhere where I end and autism begins. This is the section talking about person first versus identity first language. And then you see here's the video. So in this video, in the interviews we're doing, we're asking everybody sort of what's their preference and why, which type of language do they prefer and why, and that will be included here. So you'll see that in these are the different sections for this module. We talk about what is neurodiversity, we talk about autism, social communication, we talk about fixated interest, repetitive behaviors, sensory regulation, stress and anxiety, the business case, and things like that. So we go through sort of everything in this first module. And really our goal is to, have people who sort of are able to sort of better understand and be able to support all employees. And this really, a lot of the strategies that we found in the research and that we find for specifically for the area of autism really work for all employees. And actually what we found is that when it comes to accommodations, so often employers will sort of immediately go to this point, well, oh, if I have somebody with a disability, I'm going to have to do a whole bunch of changes and they're going to ask for a whole bunch of adjustments. And in fact, 95% of requests for adjustments or accommodations on the job come from people without disabilities, not people with disabilities. And even with those, even when people are asking, even if a person with autism or other neurodiversities is asking for an accommodation on the job, the cost is typically less than $500 for a one-time cost. And most often cost nothing at all. So it's really giving this information to employers so that they're not so sort of, I don't know the right words, but they tend to be hesitant or apprehensive, thinking that this is going to be a lot of work for their company, and really it's having a better understanding and, more importantly, acceptance of all the neurodiversities that are out there, and understanding that those neurodiversities can really help improve your bottom business line, your outcomes financially, as well as your productivity in your company.
Karen, the question I would have to you is, how and when do you envision getting the findings of this project out to employers and employees?
So the findings really are the modules themselves. So
right.
The modules themselves will be out to employers, employees. So we're already starting to do some of that quote unquote marketing so that people are aware of these modules. In middle of next month, I'm doing I have a virtual booth, everything's virtual, a virtual booth at a diversity and inclusion event, a conference with human resource professionals in British Columbia and Yukon. We also, as I said, have partnered with the Chartered Professionals of Human Resources in BC and Yukon. They are going to make this part of one of their continuing education credits for their members, so that and they have committed to helping us advertise it with a variety of their with a variety of their members. We also have connected with folks like the President's Group, who have a wide reach of employers. I would say some of the people in the President's Group are already sort of being inclusive employers, so they're really kind of. It's great that they will take these modules and maybe share them with others, but we really want to get to those employers and HR professionals who haven't yet sort of considered becoming an inclusive employer. So yeah, and we're open to any ideas of how to sort of market and share these as we can. We'll be doing social media, but we're really trying to go to where these professionals are, go to their conferences, to their workshops. We'll be doing presentations in their workshop. Right now, I'm just doing a booth because we don't have the modules fully created yet. But once we do, I'll be, going through providing presentations to those folks to get the word out there. Yeah, so the 5 modules will be sort of standalone. They're all created. We're just adding the videos into them, sort of the lifeblood of them in now. They will be, all of them have a 5-year shelf life. So they'll be sort of good for, the information in there we feel will be relevant for 5 years. We also, as part of what we're doing, is we won't go, because we're sort of a beginning and end project. The project ends for me in 2022, in March 2022. But so what we've done is made sure that there are additional resources. When I said I took a look at what exists already online, so a lot of times employers will say, I really want to know more about onboarding for people with a variety of disabilities. So they can watch our section of our module on that, but then we also give them resources of really good vetted links. So we've actually made sure they're quality links of other areas they can go to learn more, to dive deeper into that subject. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Any sort of resistance or concerns that I've heard from employers are first and foremost stem from a lack of education. So an understanding of the diversity and the capability of individuals on the spectrum.
Yeah.
The second is, you've already mentioned, is the fear of what it might cost to incorporate or to hire inclusively. And the third is a fear of lack of support if and when there are difficulties. So what happens on the job, and if they feel they've got there's some misunderstanding or there's some friction, and they feel they've got no one to turn to. So my feeling is that employers, just as the same with the medical practitioners, the reason why people on the spectrum get turned away from other supports or treatments is because the practitioner doesn't feel comfortable that they have the knowledge base to offer that support to the person on the spectrum. The same is true of employers. They feel they want to know that they've got someone to turn to if they need help.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to give them we're trying to be that, at least that beginning step, that one place they can go to start finding this information, because part of our thing is to get employers to connect with folks like the President's Group and other groups that will provide them with that ongoing support, that will give, they are not in the sort of messages, you're not in this alone. Like if there is an issue, there are other people that maybe have had the same issue, maybe, and maybe that there's there's some support to sort of work through it so it's successful and there's an outcome for both sides.
I think that's an important message to get across.
Yeah, I do too.
I'll just say one more thing from the perspective of the autistic employee. Often the concerns, difficulties that I hear are first that some individuals have difficulty with the interview process, so how that can be streamlined, made more accessible. And often it's that the range of jobs up until very recently has been very limited. And that indicates from within the disability community that there's a misunderstanding of the diversity of the people on the spectrum. And so it has been assumed that there's an intellectual disability, which isn't always the case. And in fact, in terms of what the statistics indicate today, that is not the case.
No.
And so while we're happy to have the jobs in retail, warehousing, security, takeout, restaurants, those are great, but there needs to be another layer of jobs offered to people on the spectrum that more appropriately reflect who they are. And so that's one. And then at the more professional level, the jobs that seem to have been offered up until recently have been offered in IT and accounting. And so we need to get past that, and in government, in offices, in trades for sure, and in the professions generally. So that's been a barrier. And then often because individuals on the spectrum, they've gotten through some of them have gotten through some post-secondary training or degree, and but they didn't, along with that, build any part-time jobs or those kinds of things, because that kind of multitasking may be very challenging for some. And so there's perhaps in many cases a barrier in terms of previous work experience. So 2 to 5 year window of like employment experience is a barrier for many of them.
Those are great. So anybody else have any other comments or anything to share about what you would really like employers to know about breaking down some of these barriers and what works for you? Is it Lovain or Lovan?
Vane,
Vane.
a couple of questions.
Sure.
One of them about the individualized interviews. Was there a particular reason, this is my first question, was there a particular reason why you chose to go that route as opposed to, say, a focus group approach online, where people might feel less sort of put in the corner, less the focus is on them, they're actually having a conversation with each other about the same subject, and so they might lose some of that sense of nervousness about talking about it. That was one question. And the other question was regarding the recruiting, employee retention, onboarding and support. My own personal experience, that appears to have been a problem area. And I'm just wondering what sort of suggestions your modules are making around those issues.
Sure. Okay. In terms of the focus groups, so the interviews that we're doing are really to align with some of the content that we have already. How we created that content, we didn't do focus groups like this of people interacting. We actually partnered with the CINI Foundation in Calgary, and an autistic individual is doing a project there. So he and I partnered, and we thought that the best way to get feedback from autistic employees was through the survey. So then we put out a survey and asked people to fill in sort of what are their barriers, what works for them. We allowed for sort of open sort of comments for people to click on things. And we got sort of, as I said, over 170 responses for that. So I would, so now we're doing the individual interviews to sort of give life to those. And I completely agree. It is sort of really nerve-wracking being the only one. I really wish we could bring folks together and sort of do that interview. But given COVID, we can't put a lot of people in the same room at close proximity. And again, these modules are targeting sort of human resource professionals and employers. And so we're really wanting that the look and feel of the interviews to be really sort of very consistent and cohesive. And it's harder to do that on a Zoom and edit a Zoom call to make sure that, you know, because to make sure that we get the sort of message that we want to get across in the 30 to 60 seconds of them watching that video. So it's hard because I'm trying to balance between you know, we really wanted to make sure that the content was driven by voices of autistic employees. And so we worked hard on that. And now we want to sort of give life to that content by having videos. And it's hard because if we have sort of open discussions that we film, it's hard to edit those down because, again, when HR professionals are taking this, they're like, I've got 45 minutes to take this module. If we have modules that are 2-3 hours long, it's less likely that somebody's going to even take it. So we're trying to make each of the 5 modules between, you know, maximum of 45 minutes. People can go into it and stop it and then come back to it. But, you know, if we had an opportunity to go the next level, and I think Joette was sort of saying, what could we do next? I think it would be great to augment, and I really like that idea of having some more focus groups of which we could create that people could really start to hear the differences and the voices from others, and it might make people more comfortable in talking about their issues. And the other one was your question about what's in those modules. And so maybe I didn't have them up.
Well, with particular respect to onboarding and continued support.
Okay. So when we're talking about the strategies for say, for adjusting the job interview process. A lot of the strategies that we looked at to sort of what we're calling breaking the job interview barrier are things like giving them ideas of how to change the location of it, letting the candidate know what to expect before the interview occurs, limiting the number of interviewers, allowing for breaks during the interview process. And again, these aren't sort of a list of checklists of what we're asking people to do, but we're giving them a variety of things of tools, of strategies they can choose from that work for them. We're asking people to consider a competence-based process, or a demonstration-based process. We're also talking, letting employers know to avoid sensory distractions during the interview and to be okay with different interaction styles, to realize that differences in eye contact will happen. There may be, you can expect to have fleeting eye contact, no eye contact, or maybe even prolonged eye contact, but don't put so much of your pressure on the eye contact. That is not really what's saying. We're saying, you may expect long pauses, you may have to prompt the person. So we're giving them ideas there. In terms about communicating during the interview, we did ask, we have sort of taken the general questions. We've looked at the research of the types of questions that are asked in interviews, such as tell me about yourself, or can you tell me about your background? And we're asking them to, we're giving them ideas of how to readjust those questions. Instead of tell me about yourself, is tell me about your past and your current education. Be very specific in your questions. Tell me about your previous work-related experience. What do you like to do that relates to this job? So we've done a lot of those types of things. And then so that's sort of the onboarding, or the interview process. And then in terms of the onboarding, we're looking at some strategies, having people getting to know each other in some way. And a lot of these onboarding strategies aren't just for individuals with ASD or other neurodiversities. Asking all employees about adjustments and providing examples, rather than just sort of making it look like you have to have some sort of disability or some sort of issue to ask for an adjustment or accommodation on the job. We want to create workplaces where people ask, what can we do as an employer to make you work to your potential? Like, what do you need? And asking all employees that, so that there's no sort of feel that some employees are getting sort of special attention that way. Involving co-workers and training, providing specific training on other workplace expectations, assigning a mentor, and taking advantage of external support. So there's a variety of things that we do. And we also talk about how to provide effective communication and giving and receiving instructions. So it gets quite in depth, and it's really about practical strategies. We don't sort of give them these high level theory things. We say, instead of doing a 5-step instruction, do 2 steps at a time or 1 step at a time. Use visuals, write it down, like all of those types of things.
I think particularly the mentoring aspect, as well as the other things you mentioned, are really important, because we know statistically quite often the people we're talking about do not retain their jobs. Yeah,
definitely. Have one more question, and Lori.
Hi. I have a question. I'm kind of curious. I have a girlfriend who is in the IT, she's in the employment section of an IT company. And so I was curious to know, like, your 3 or 4 interviews you're doing, was the questionnaire that they're doing supporting autism employees, because in her case, a lot of people are, either choosing not to disclose, etc. So she may not officially be an employer who, who hires in an active way, but the default being in the IT business is she gets a lot of people on the spectrum.
Yeah, and we found that it's a personal choice for disclosure. There's a lot of legal issues around it as well. And
yes.
autistic individuals, we only found that 38% of people did not disclose. So the majority did, but for their own personal reasons. Some people disclose just to HR, but not to their manager, and that works for them. Really, our modules are about, and how we start out our modules are 1 in 40 individuals in our province has a diagnosis of autism. You already have somebody on the spectrum, most likely working for you as an employer. And we're going to give you some ideas of how to work with people with neurodiversities, because don't focus on the label. Don't focus on getting people to sort of have to tell you something before you adjust strategies. These are strategies that are going to help a wide range of employees that you're working with. So that's really how we've tried to address that.
Okay,
Karen,
thank
there's
you.
one other thing for me, in that it's one thing to have this knowledge imparted to the employer, but some attention also needs to be given to how that is presented to the peers in the workplace. Often what happens is the employer you see beginning of the day, or you see irregularly throughout your day, but the people you're working alongside, they can make or break your job.
Absolutely. And so part of our one section on creating an inclusive workplace environment, we talk heavily about the importance of having training opportunities for all employees. And that's really what we're focusing on. We can't do everything in these modules. So we give them actual resources to access different types of training. We really encourage them not to have autism training, or Julie is the new employee, we're all going to learn about Julie. Like, it's not that. We're encouraging them to look at their professional development within their organization already, and purposefully add in how to become an inclusive employer with a wide variety of people and differences over time, so that the coworkers, you're correct, the coworkers themselves really are what is that sort of maintaining that employment. And I see that Aaron has popped up, so.
Yeah, Karen, I just wanted to chime in and let you know that Carolyn sent us a message in the chat. Do you want me to read it out to you?
Sure.
So she's wondering, since this research relates to other types of neurodiversities, are the modules specifically focused on ASD, or are they also generally applied to neurodiversity as well?
They are specifically focused on ASD. That was our mandate. However, we do talk about related neurodiversities or other neurodiversities. And as I said, a lot of the strategies that we propose work for the general population as well as individuals with autism. So, but our mandate was autistic individuals. I'm going to end there. I want to thank everybody so much for your time. I know I've gone over by 15 minutes. If you would like to be interviewed, that would be fabulous. We'd really appreciate it. If you'd like to just know more and have a chat with me about the process of being interviewed, that would be great. Just get a hold of me at karen.bopp@ubc.ca, which is in the chat. We can go from there.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody.